Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this community outcomes meeting. It is live with myself, the Mayor of West Yorkshire. As you may be able to hear, I have the virus and I'm not able to speak really well. So I have a brilliant understudy and we've had a good briefing. So I hope you'll bear with us. And the agenda is exactly the same, but thank you, Alison, for holding the fort and taking us through this. Thank you, and thank you to the Chief Constable and others for coming. Thank you. Alison.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you watching online, if you remember, this meeting is published a week in advance with all the papers. So if you want to have a look at the papers which are on our website as we're going through this, so that you've got the same information that the people in the room have got. And hopefully for future meetings, if you've got any ideas about questions and areas or themes that we should be speaking to the police about, then please do get in touch with the team. We're really keen to represent your views and wishes, so please do tell us the areas of interest for you. So welcome from me, Alison Tracy's Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, but not Tracy because she's saving her voice. But we'll start with Rob.
Hi, I'm Robert Forrest, Head of Policing and Crime at the Combined Authority.
Thank you.
Russ Hughes, I'm Chief Superintendent in charge of Corporate Services, West Yorkshire Police.
John Robbins, Chief Constable of West Yorkshire Police, and for item 1 we have
Mark Hibbert, I'm a Staff Officer at the Chief Officer team.
Thank you. And as other members of the command team come forward to give their papers, they'll introduce themselves individually. And so on the other table is members of our communications team who are recording this meeting, and members of our engagement team who have pulled the papers together and done the engagement work necessary to get the questions right. So we will just note the apologies of the Deputy Chief Constable, Catherine Hankinson. Any more apologies?
no, thank you.
So item 2, notes of the previous meeting on the 17th of September. Do we all agree those are true?
I agree, thank you.
Any matters arising?
No.
No, all actions are completed or ongoing. So we move then to the announcements of the Mayor. And we're really delighted to welcome our new Head of Policing and Crime. He's introduced himself, Robert Forrest, who started 4 weeks ago this week.
4 weeks.
Yeah, 4 weeks. So really happy to see him here. Although very sad to lose Julie Reid, who was here for many years and was a great support to the whole team and to West Yorkshire Police too. I am bold enough to say I'm sure that was the case. And she's retired after 22 years, so well deserved. The other item to report is that the £1 million Safer Communities Fund grant round is now open. It opened on Monday the 11th of November and will close on Friday at 12 noon, 13th of December. So this money is only possible because of the work of the Economic Crime Unit. So West Yorkshire Police's Economic Crime Unit, they search for the assets of criminals here in West Yorkshire and seize those assets under the proceeds of crime legislation. That money comes back into West Yorkshire. Half of it goes straight back to government. We need to say that, which we'd like to hear of going back. Some of it's then shared with community criminal justice partners like the courts, for example, CPS, because they're all part of helping us to recover that cash. And then the money that is left, West Yorkshire Police shares 50-50 with the Mayor's office. And we're able then to offer that money as part of the Mayor's Safe Communities Fund to small grassroots organisations, charities in our communities who are helping us every day in small and bigger ways to deliver the Mayor's Police and Crime Plan. So they are essential partners in the fight against crime, and we're delighted to be able to offer this £1 million fund. There are pots of either up to 10,000, up to 20,000, or there's a collaboration pot of up to 80,000 where 4 organisations can come together. So a fantastic opportunity to do some really brilliant life-changing work here in West Yorkshire, and we do invite and urge as many charities and grassroots organisations as possible to consider applying for that fund. We have no decision making about who gets it. We've got a people panel that's been trained, and community safety partnerships are also represented on those panels. So we look forward to seeing your bids, and we look forward to you winning and us being able to share in those celebrations in February. The other item to report is the recommissioning of the Restorative Justice Service, which is a brilliant asset to the victim support portfolio that the Mayor funds each year. It brings those harmed by crime and those responsible for committing that crime into contact. It gives them both the opportunity to talk about the impact of that crime, and it's got a really high success rate in preventing further crime happening in the future. So the charity Restorative Solutions CIC has been recommissioned to continue providing this region-wide programme over the next 3 years, with funding totalling 893,000. Since it's been commissioned 3 years ago, it's supported nearly 6,000 people. So it's a brilliant service and is well worth that investment. And then finally, the Police and Crime Plan consultation has just closed on the 31st of October. I'd like to thank the engagement team for the sterling work that they've undertaken going out to the public. We've done surveys, but we've done lots and lots of face-to-face meetings. Thank you to the public for sending in your feedback on the plan, and we're really looking forward to sending the draft Police and Crime Plan to the Police and Crime Panel in a few weeks' time, and for you to be able to see the fruits of all your labour and the labour of the engagement team. But we're really happy to say that the priorities that the Mayor outlined in her manifesto pledges have been validated by the feedback from the public, as you will see in December. So now we'll move on to the substantive item of today's meeting, starting off with item 4, which is the serious disorder in Harehills. And we've all received a paper from West Yorkshire Police, thank you very much. And I just wondered, Chief Constable, if you'd like to first outline the key points in your report for those who haven't yet had a chance to read it.
Yeah, if I may, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll just give a brief overview. As we know, Thursday the 18th of July 2024, West Yorkshire Police received an emergency call, a 999 call from colleagues in Leeds City Council, social workers who were acting on an order that had been issued by the family court. And that order was to remove 4 children from address on Luxor Street in Harehills in Leeds. The social workers present reported that they were encountering difficulties at the address, including a hostile crowd gathering outside as well. I think you're aware of this, Deputy Mayor, but the police had no knowledge of that court order, and there's no reason why we should have at this stage, or about the removal of the children from outside from the address. The response officers have gone, as they do every day of the week and of the year, and they've gone to support their colleagues in social services. They've attended at the address, and there's been a period of protracted negotiations, which has resulted in the children coming out of the address in accordance with the order, in support of what the social services were seeking and needed to do. However, there were large crowds that had formed outside, and that became hostile. They engaged in violence, and they engaged, as we are aware, in criminal acts and disorder. The damage and the disorder was firstly directed at the police officers, then at a police vehicle, and then it evolved throughout the next couple of hours into setting a fire in the street. And as we've seen from social media, the arson of a public service bus, later on. The disorder continued sporadically over possibly 3 seats, whilst there was a multi-agency response point to place by the police, the local authority, the council, the fire service, ambulance services, elected officials, and what we describe as key individuals in communities, those key individuals who we've got relationships with, who negotiate and are from communities. So it was a multi-agency response. I am pleased to report that there was no serious injuries to the police, there was no injuries to the public or responding agencies, there was not significant damage to property outside of public property, and that's despite the police and officers being struck by missiles and having items such as brick and masonry thrown at them at various points during the night. As they approached midnight, the crowd had dispersed and the disorder had abated, there was a significant policing and community engagement operation that took place throughout the night, the next day, through the weekend, and in the weeks that follow, and it's still ongoing to this day. And that was to ensure operationally that disorder did not return, that it did not reoccur in the communities of Harehills or anywhere else, indeed in West Yorkshire. So we're pleased to report again that there was no recurrence of the events seen in that 4-hour period on the Thursday evening. As we've previously published, there's a large-scale investigation now ongoing. It was launched immediately that night in response to the disorder. So far, there's been 8 people charged with offences of arson and violent disorder, and those include what I consider to be 4 of the main perpetrators who've been sentenced already and imprisoned. There's many others who remain under investigation, and details of those are within the report. And there's still many other people who were not yet identified, but we will be actively seeking and continue to seek over the next months and years. So the investigation continues, our community engagement plan continues, and we're just still ongoing with the post-incident review of the events and the operational decisions made that night. That's been ever so slightly delayed, as it says in the report, due to other events that occurred 2 or 3 weeks later across the country. So there's a comprehensive explanation of much of what I've summarised there in the report, Deputy Mayor, but I'm of course open to any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for the really detailed report. And I recognise that there's a lot of ongoing investigations and that sub judice applies, and we don't want to upset in any way or prejudice any way those ongoing investigations, and so won't be talking about any individuals or prejudicing those investigations. And I think it's fair to point out that Tracy and I are as one when we say that we've had lots of very good feedback from the community about the overall policing on that night, the fact that no one was harmed, and the fact that the community were given permission to deal with the incidents that were in front of them themselves, because the relationship that had been built up over the 18 months previously through the clear hole build work, which has been led by Inspector Chain, that was really appreciated, and the key individuals in that Harehills community who were leaders on that night and brought calm have spoken to us personally and told us about their appreciation for the fact that you listened to them, that you left at their request, and that as a result of that, the risk of harm was minimised.
Thank you.
So we want to thank those officers who were out on the night, who put themselves at risk, and we did meet them with the Home Secretary the next day, of course, and we were able to talk to them ourselves about their experience and their initial thoughts and feelings, and we do appreciate their contribution and all the efforts that they put in during a very difficult period. Notwithstanding the good stuff, we also felt it incumbent upon us to visit the community and invite some of those community groups that we've funded over the years through the Mayor's Community Safe Communities Fund to feed back their reflections some weeks post the event, and to tell us what they felt the lessons were from their perspective. We spoke to a number of community groups, individuals, young people in particular, and the questions we're going to ask have been co-produced with those individuals, those groups, those young people. And we asked them in good faith because they've asked us to ask those questions. And I think that actually, having spoken to some of those people, they want to ask them in the gratitude that I've already spoken about for the fact that no harm happened, but with their lived experience of how it felt for them, mainly post the incident, actually, not during so much. So the first question was about how what happened impacted on the young people within that community of Harehills. And we've been asked to ask you what steps are being taken to build trust between the police and young people in Harehills, noting in particular that the blanket bail conditions after the disorder were seen by some young people as punitive rather than supportive. So, for example, we were told about young people who were in employment, but because there was a blanket bail condition that if you lived on one side of Harehills Avenue, you couldn't cross the other, or Harehills Lane, you couldn't cross the other, and their employment might have been there, or their caring responsibility might have been there, or their youth activity might have been there, and they felt that their aspirations to be rehabilitated, to be diverted from whatever activity had happened. Some of those people obviously don't feel that they were guilty, and there's a process happening, which is fine, but they felt that it was a blanket bail condition and that there wasn't an understanding of the harm that that might cause to the relationship between those young people and the police. So your reflections on that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so bail conditions are used by the police either to bail somebody to court or to bail them back to the police station whilst the investigation's ongoing, and they're there very specifically laid down in legislation, and they can only be applied for certain reasons, and that's about preventing somebody from and ensuring somebody's going to surrender to custody to come back in, or preventing them from committing further offences, or to prevent them interfering with witnesses or obstructing justice whilst that investigation's ongoing. I can understand how people would perceive them to be blanket, because often in periods of disorder, and whilst that disorder's been at certain times, we might apply curfew applications around that bail conditions, reporting restrictions, or location preventions to help people not get involved in the same thing again at the same time. When those conditions are laid, they're individual to each one, but there's an acceptance that in circumstances like this, it'll look like a blanket, if that makes sense, if there's repeated people being given similar things. The important thing to remember is that they've got a right of appeal through their solicitor to the magistrates, and people do take that up, and we will change them. They've got a right of appeal back to the police about them. And indeed, in this case, I'm pleased to report that we very quickly started receiving some of the feedback about the restrictive nature for attendance at either work locations or at community groups like Catch or other places that weren't raised to us on the night by them or the solicitors or the family members, and then the commander in charge of all of that did address some of the issues and made sure custody sergeants were being more adaptive in the type of bail that we're giving people. Back to the other point around what we're doing around the sort of first part of the question around young people, and I won't go into the details, but we've been involved, I think as you're aware, because some of those groups, with some of the Clear Hole Build initiatives, with the Catch programme, with other programmes such as Shine and other youth provisions for many, many years in Harehills. What we maybe need to think about further is how we outreach into certain communities and make a greater effort to reach them and go to them rather than waiting for people to come. But I think I do know that Catch, as an example, has a significant number from the Roma community who were involved in this as well. So some of that work is already ongoing.
Thank you. And going forward, where, God forbid this should ever recur, but where there are instances of disorder or activity where multiple children and young people are being possibly arrested and bailed, going forward, do you think it might be a good idea to sit down as a group, a team, and work out some questions that you might want to be asking those young people, their solicitors, about, right, what are the things that you need to succeed, to make sure that you've got the right support, if you're working, what do we need to do proactively together so that you don't have to go through the costly experience of going to court to get bail conditions changed, you don't have the angst of thinking, oh, I can't do this and I can't do that we co-produce that with those young people, because actually it'll save a lot of time and it'll build that trust, won't it?
Yeah, no, we'll definitely can look at that. Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the other questions that we were asked to ask you was, do you feel that West Yorkshire Police are accessible and open to listening to the concerns of local young people, particularly through the Police Race Action Plan, where there's a focus on addressing the feelings of being over-policed and unfairly targeted and obviously underprotected. How are we doing that, and how can we do that better, not just in Harehills but across West Yorkshire?
Yeah, I think we're doing it, but we will always seek to do it even more. There's always more engagement and more listening that can occur. Just before I get into some of those, can I, just for clarity, make the point that this seat of disorder was around a child family court issue and a community who took out their frustrations effectively upon policing and the state and the bus company as a lightning rod for the frustrations. To my knowledge, there was no basis of this being around that specifically people being over-policed or unfairly targeted. The initial seat of disorder was over a family court bit. But your points are not lost on me about that feeling within young people and specifically around certain parts of Leeds, and Harehills as one of those. So I've mentioned Catch, I've mentioned Shine. We've also got a junior sports hub that we work with, Project Shields. We have specific education officers working across Leeds. We've got Gypsy and Romany engagement officers specific to communities in Leeds as well. And after this event, we've also brought in Roma heritage police officers from other parts of West Yorkshire to work in and around Harehills, and specifically with young people in and around Harehills. We have access to and we listen to the Harehills Youth Forum that's run and facilitated by one of our neighbourhood policing PCs in that area. So without giving you a big long list of things, we are attempting to listen to people. Our training around frontline officer engagement, cultural awareness, stop and search, other elements, all has aspects of understanding young people's perception of policing and what it's like to have a policing uniform coming up and approaching you. So we're working harder and harder all the time. Some of it is not helped and it is slightly hindered by public sector cuts across all public services. So some of the fantastic work that local authorities and councils and other statutory bodies used to do is not there as much as it is. And we're looking forward where we can in the future to engage with more and more groups on it. Increasingly, we're reliant upon voluntary sector, community-based groups to facilitate these things. But we've never walked away from neighbourhood police, and it will remain a commitment to us, and that's the main element as to where we'll engage with young people, whether it be Harehills or any other part of Leeds or West Yorkshire.
Yeah, and as we know from our recent Peel inspection, neighbourhood policing is something that we're good at, but I do think I just need to come back to you on the seat of this original disturbance, yes, was around the removal of a child, of several children. I accept that, but I feel like it's a bit naive to say that that was why within 5 minutes 20 people were outside the house, and then within 15 minutes 100 people were outside the house, and then not long after that there were 500 people outside the house. That came from deep-seated distrust of policing, maybe not all West Yorkshire policing. We know that a lot of those communities have got experience of policing from around the world, and that definitely was an element of some of the anxiety that was seen on that night. But we know that because we have the police race action plan, that's there because of the lack of trust and confidence from black minority ethnic people in policing generally. So to say that it was just about the removal of those children, I don't think fairly represents the feelings of that community, and the fact that actually any community can be a tinderbox if you don't put that work in and focus on those communities most at need. And that is right, that it's not just policing, it has got to be a partnership response. But hearing what you're doing is great, but I suppose it's about how sustainable is that? How can we work with you, the Mayor and I, local authority leaders, who the Mayor has a role in convening, how can we all work together to ensure that that work continues for the benefit of those communities?
Sorry, forgive me, some of my comments there were, we've received information and intelligence that the Roma community specifically believe, because of the policing requirements in other parts of Eastern Europe, that the police could overrule that court order. That was the issue, and we can't. That's why the crowd gathered, because they felt that we could have not allowed that to happen, whereas we can't not allow it to happen in this country. Whereas in other parts of Europe, the police have the ability, I'm told, to do that.
And we know, we can confirm that when we met with the community that day and afterwards, what we were told, particularly by the young children, is that their parents were saying, why are the police stealing our children? And they felt the fear that those children would never be removed. But what I'm saying is that notwithstanding, and we completely accept that more than the Roma community became involved very quickly, a wider Harehills demographic became involved very quickly, who didn't have that perception, didn't have that lived experience. And the reason for that is because of those tensions that are ongoing with black and brown communities and policing, for which the Police Race Action Plan has been developed as a direct response to that.
And I believe, and you'll tell me otherwise, Deputy Mayor, that we're further forward with a lot of the work we're doing around the Police Race Action Plan in West Yorkshire. We're driven and committed to it, and we've invested significantly compared to other areas in making sure we've got dedicated professional staff in it, alongside all of the cultural awareness training and all these other things we're doing. So our commitment to that will remain.
Yeah, and my point is that really we don't want complacency about it was just because of that. Actually, that need to keep that engagement with those communities is as real today as it was before the incident, and it will be for many years to come. And we want to work with you, with all our partners, to make sure we put the right resources in place and the right support in place to make that possible.
I and my staff are not complacent about it.
Thank you. You talked about a lot of the engagement that's happening, and particularly you've now got some officers who are Roma in background, and that is actually being massively appreciated by the young people and the people that we spoke to. And the question they asked us is, why has it taken so long?
That's part again about our recruitment processes and our attractiveness to people from different heritages. We've been working on that for many, many years, around making a more diverse workforce, but we don't post people dependent upon their heritage or their background or their ethnicity or their gender, because that'd be contrary to the law. So it was a specific tactical and operational requirement to move people in. We're engaging all of the time through our People Directorate, through action plans within each and every district to encourage people and their families, to encourage people to apply into policing. However, the greatest responsibility on us is to build trust and confidence in policing, and then it'll become an attractive employer to people. But as you've known from other reports, we've significantly increased and changed the diversity of the organisation over the last 5 years, and we'll continue to do so. But it's a long hard battle in that sense. But yeah, if those young people would like to work with us, work with the officers, work with community projects, we've got whole programmes of work around cadets and access routes into policing and positive support for people who are wishing to apply. We'd welcome them all to come forward.
Yeah, and obviously Catch have got that employment pathway for our blue light services, which I think we need to revisit and see how we can support that further. Maybe through West Yorkshire Combined Authority, because they've got an apprenticeship programme, there might be some links there, because you're right, the more people from all our communities who want to be police, then the better policing's response will be to all our communities. Again, from the young people and the people we spoke about in Harehills, they asked about improving visibility, including in schools, to build trust and confidence with young people and the community at large. And obviously we know some of that work is ongoing. We know about Polled. Just thought the public would be really interested to understand what work's ongoing.
Yeah, so you've referenced Polled, which is a police education programme that we're rolling out across all schools. 92% of schools in West Yorkshire have got them. There's just under 1,000 schools across West Yorkshire. That includes a whole host of lessons around engagement with the police-related matters, safety, violence against women and girls, race, discrimination, criminal offences. Starting to be integrated into that is now some more structured lesson plans for police officers and PCSOs as they go into schools, whether that's engaging around knife crime, violence, safety, drugs, cars, whatever that is. So we're working up and building that through. The key engagement for schools is either through Safer Schools officers, where schools themselves and local authorities can support policing. We'll deploy Safer Schools officers into certain schools, and there's a number across West Yorkshire for Carmanor and a whole host around in Leeds, by way of example. We also have youth engagement and schools engagement officers across the organisation who are doing a whole host of work. And our primary response again is neighbourhood policing, local accessible familiar officers in communities who will be around school gates at the right time of day and night for parents and children going in or engaging in the schools. But it is a pressured, difficult deployment issue. I wish we had more officers to put into that. What goes on within the school environment is, of course, shouldn't be policed by policing. That's policed by the schools. But there's a huge engagement opportunity for us there. And again, we've been into schools on other occasions, so we're committed to it, both from very top from my level, all the way through the organisation. So it's maybe not as many people in it as we used to have, but we're still committed to it. And I go back to that, Paulette, that's a long-term engagement plan to support young people across West Yorkshire.
Yeah, and again, our commitment to that is 100%. And as you know, the Mayor's written to every school and encouraged them to be part, which is why I think we're now at 92% of all schools,
yep,
from 37 when you started. So, yeah, anything else you need from us, just ask. So going back to the Harehills community, one of the things that they felt on the night was that they were fairly targeted on social media. Not a policing matter per se, of course, but generally we know that hate is perpetrated on social media all the time, and a lot of the language that was ascribed to people living in Harehills was racist, discriminatory, and some of the communities we spoke to wondered what powers policing had to tackle that, and what more proactively could be done in partnership maybe with others.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, it's very difficult on the night or in the middle of an incident like that to tackle it without the necessary intervention by those social media providers through having the right algorithms to take things out. There was, through discrimination and assumptions, a whole host of misinformation flying around on that. So retrospectively then our ability, and we do where we can get the evidence, it's malicious communications, it's hate crimes, it's incitement to violence. If you fast forward to the urban disorder up and down the country, we had some of the earliest and fastest prosecutions in that in West Yorkshire, where people were resident of West Yorkshire trying to incite violence in others. So we do it where we can. We've had limited success in the Harehills incident so far, but I feel for those communities. Harehills is an incredibly vibrant, diverse, proud community with a whole host of people of amazingly different heritages, and it's usually people from outside of West Yorkshire or even outside of the UK who choose to sort of try to incite hatred and upset. So don't believe everything you see on social media.
Absolutely, and obviously there's an opportunity now with the new government who have said they're going to review the Online Harms Act, and you've got a role in the NPCC, I've got a role in the APCC to try to influence that, to make it have more teeth, to protect more people more of the time. So my final question before we get to post-incident learning is just on your communication strategy generally. Can you say about what that strategy was, what information was shared in the days after the disturbance, during the disturbance, especially around the police response, to give that reassurance to the public and to wider West Yorkshire?
Yeah, so on the evening during the incident, there was social media and press releases about the ongoing incident. There was also then verbal communication by the officers on the ground, neighbourhood policing teams with the key individual networks, counsellors, and you've very kindly given some positive feedback around that already. Moving into the early hours of Friday, the 19th to the 7th, just at midnight, we've then done another press release about reassurance to the residents of Harehills about what's happening, an affirmation it's a homicide and major inquiry team led investigation. The first lines around criminals feeling the full weight of the law, an appeal about people avoiding speculation, and that's deliberately done in the strategy to hit the morning media in the early hours to go out with the breakfast news. And then again at lunchtime, we've gone with a further press release, again to fit the afternoon media and into the evening with, as we've established more that's gone on as the, really less than 24 hours working up, and we've explained the initial lead up to the incident, details about deployment decisions, talked about the community mediation work that you've referenced, and again reaffirmed the investigation, appeals for information, reassurance, and how we've worked with local people. Then later that day again in the evening we've done another press release around the drive to identify for those of arrests and the fact that arrests are now being made to reassure communities about the speed of the response and the robustness of that response. And that's where we started our first appeals for families and young people to hand themselves in. We don't need to arrest everybody, and we were starting to formulate a plan about how we would open up other facilities. Then the day after, on the Saturday, we start our first charge notes about how we've now arrested and charged individuals going to court for violent disorder. So within less than 48 hours, we're showing that support for the community by a robust response. And then we back that up with support for the peaceful vigil that's been going on, with reassurance about the police presence, reiterating the investigation and the major incident portal, because we need to harvest information from the communities. And then into next week, and I won't go through them all, we then start the subsequent updates on further prosecutions. By that Monday, we'd already identified 40 people, and further people had been arrested and been put into the criminal justice system. And then a week on, the commander of Leeds has done a week on with Harehills with BBC Radio Leeds to talk about the community engagement activity that had started and to talk about the work that's been done locally and to thank the communities for all that they'd done. And that continued into that weekend. So there's often a feeling of not enough, but as the information's developed and as we've gone through the phases of that communication strategy, we've released things and we've given, I believe, sufficient to the media in order to get into communities. Of what we did identify that the certain elements of that community were not getting their information from mainstream media. So innovatively, the local officers and staff, the neighbourhood policing team have worked with Romanian TV networks, and we've identified misinformation on Romanian TV networks, which we've then challenged and supported, and we've then done some media with specific outlets, which was, again, I believe, well received to actually then get into households in Harehills through a different means.
Yeah, thank you, and that's really comprehensive. As you know, the Mayor and I received some feedback. I hasten to add, not from the people of Harehills who were there, saw what was going on, actually knew what was going on, but from others across wider West Yorkshire, that they appeared to see, particularly on social media, the police leaving the community of Harehills and not protecting the community of Harehills. We now know that the police were asked by the people of Harehills to leave, and that's why you left. But do you feel that some of the misinformation around that could have been better managed through some more immediate feedback from the police, maybe a press release, something of that nature, which would have given that absolute rubbish? That's not what happened, this is what happened, and the proof of the pudding is nobody was harmed. So it worked, didn't it?
Yes, we could have probably done a little bit more, a little bit faster, maybe not using that language, but that's always a challenge though, until you're actually, in that limited resources with limited people there on that night. Not for myself, Deputy Mayor, but with the benefit of hindsight, it always seems a lot easier, but they're really trying to establish facts, establish what's going on. It was a unique set of circumstances that night in many ways, because it became very clear that the violence was predicated and directed at the state of policing and nothing else. And so our presence there was actually in their mind inciting a target. Nobody likes to see some of the images about police cars and rubbish fires and the bus. Nobody likes to see that, but the commanders, I think, did an amazing job about balancing everything off to understand what was the overall objective, and that's to keep the people of Harehills safe, to keep the businesses, shops and communities of Harehills safe, both on that night and in the weeks to come. A different policing response could have had a wholly different consequence, not just that night, but over that whole weekend and weeks to follow, as you've already alluded to.
Yeah, and obviously things happened in subsequent weeks, and here in West Yorkshire we didn't face the same, impact of the national events.
Yep.
Thanks very much. So just on post-learning, I know that that's a huge piece of work. It's ongoing and it involves lots of different partners, not just the police, and that is quite right. And we're not asking you to tell us anything that would preempt the outcome of that. But again, from some of the conversations we've had with stakeholders in Harehills and wider, there were some concerns about the manner in which some families felt that arrests were heavy-handed and intimidating, that there wasn't the use of translators that maybe there could have been, and so just wondered what steps were being taken to understand where translators, interpreters needed to be used, when are they used with non-English speaking families to prevent misunderstanding and uphold fairness.
Yeah, if your office later on can try and negotiate us some details so we can get a greater, deeper understanding of that, would really be welcome that to try and get to where it's come from. Very clearly laid out in legislation that whenever a person is subject to an interview or custody processes, they will always have access to an interpreter, and to our knowledge there's been no issues with that. They'll either be down a telephone line or a computer screen when they're going through their rights and their entitlements, and in an interview it will always be somebody in person. There was some pressure during the post-investigation around a shortage of people with certain language skills, but again we tried to negotiate our way through that about ensuring we staged interviews and staged arrests. We also actively encouraged people to who were charged with looking after young people who were suspects to bring them in on a voluntary basis. We opened up a police station to facilitate that so that we could have those people in the north of Leeds closer to the point, and then we could have a speedier process to bring people through.
And did you have appropriate adults there?
Yes, yeah, there's always appropriate adults. It would be contrary to legislation against the law to be dealing with a person under 18 without an appropriate adult, and every stage of the process needs an appropriate adult. They'll either be a parent, family member, community member, or if they're deemed inappropriate or they're not available, there's a scheme through an appropriate adult scheme. So everybody who's a young person will have an appropriate adult with them to look after them, speak up for them. And if it's not a family member, the West Yorkshire Police policy is that they will always have an appropriate adult and a solicitor. So even if the appropriate adult doesn't ask for a solicitor, we will make sure there's one there. So all young people at all stages of it will have an appropriate adult, and that is in legislation and we can't deal with them. And anybody who's got any language barriers or raises any language barriers will have an interpreter. The challenges often come on the street, but again, we've got 24-hour access through mobile devices to live interpreters, which we communicate with people all the time. It's happening across the streets of West Yorkshire all the time. One of the very early operational challenges that I think you heard from some of the officers attending was, in the heat of the moment at that issue, there was very few people who could actually speak English. So the officers who were trying to communicate couldn't get through. That's not the people's fault, that's just the way it is. But in the heat of that did abate us and sort of curtail us from actually doing the normal communication that we would do in the time. So again, there's a way through that with interpreters on the telephone and things, but you can't do that with a crowd of 100. That's the difficulty in that sense. And so rumour and speculation. But certainly young people and adults who are needing interpreters, they've all been facilitated. I'd welcome the details of any problems.
Yeah.
We pick them up with multiple people needing the same languages at certain points, but that's not unusual either.
Thank you for that. And what we will do is we'll go back to the source of those questions and we'll triangulate, because I know that officers in West Yorkshire are mandated to use body-worn videos at all times, so we will be able to track any claims that translators, interpreters weren't used, or indeed appropriate adults. So very happy to get the details and feed them back. So is there anything in closing that you'd like to say? Because the questions that we were asked to ask and the questions that we wanted to ask, bearing in mind we've asked you lots of questions and you've reported to the Police and Crime Panel on 2 occasions. So this is a well-rehearsed debate that we've had since the unrest happened in Harehills. This is not the first time we've spoken.
What I haven't said before, Deputy Mayor, is that I would like to pay tribute to the frontline officers and staff, as you've done, but also to the community members of Harehills who came out in strength on that night. So members of the community who came out, whether they were councillors, independent advisory group members, members of key individual networks, just people out of the community and out of Harehills to come and help dissipate and disperse the disorder. I pay tribute to those people. I commend the initial officers who you've spoken to, who for their resilience, their fortitude, their patience in the way in which they dealt with that initial incident. I praise the bravery of the subsequent officers who attended to deal with disorder, the women and men of West Yorkshire who came across West Yorkshire without protective equipment, did the very best that they could do on that evening in very violent and difficult circumstances. I acknowledge the difficult decisions of the supervisors on the streets, of the commanders and the people in the command rooms. Everybody's always willing to criticise what they're doing. They're doing the best job they can do, and I think in the main their decisions have de-escalated what could have been an even more significant incident. But again, I'll return to, I think the people of Harehills who stood up and were accountable and came out to help society, help policing. I was incredibly impressed with each and every one of them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I could just add a little to what's been said. Thank you for that, John, because I absolutely agree that the kins in Harehills through the clear hold and build have paid off. It could have gone horribly wrong. No one was harmed. And the response that we've heard from West Yorkshire Police to also have learnings from this is really of value. And I'd like to also thank publicly the people of Harehills that took time to tell us what they wanted to ask you, because we represent the public in holding you to account, and they took time out of their days to have a think about what was important to them. And also just to give my thanks to the West Yorkshire Police, who after this then went to backfill for incidences across the country. They're incredibly brave officers, and it makes me enormously proud to be the Police and Crime Commissioner. However, we can all learn, and complacency will be the death of all of us apart from this virus. But I just wanted to thank you for the way you've approached this, and let's hope it doesn't happen again. But I think the people of Harehills hopefully will be reassured that we've had a frank sharing of views, but there's still more to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on then to item 5 on dangerous dogs. Again, the paper is in the pack. It's the first time we've had a full paper on this matter, and I'm going to ask the officer presenting to introduce himself formally.
Deputy Mayor, Chief Superintendent John Harehills from Op Support West Yorkshire.
You're very welcome. Is there anything you'd like to say in present? You know, we've read the paper, but if you want to say anything? No? Okay. So this is an exception paper, so we've not had this before, as I've said. We would really like you to tell us about the increase in dogs humanely euthanised in 2024 compared to previous years.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, so the increase is a direct result of the XL bully legislation that was introduced last year, and the significant increase in reports received into West Yorkshire Police, and therefore the number of dogs that were required to be processed.
Yeah, I mean, we've noticed the huge increase in numbers, not just in West Yorkshire, but elsewhere in the big metropolitan areas, which are pretty alarming, actually. Might be some conversations that we need to be having at a national level about the costs of all this, but we'll come back to you on that one. The next question, what are the key challenges around this area of work for us in 2025, and how are we looking to meet these challenges? And I'm sure funding is one of them.
It is. There are 3 key challenges for us. The first one being the limited number of dog legislation officers. West Yorkshire Police has previously operated with 2 such officers who have been sufficient to process the volumes of animals that we've needed to look at in West Yorkshire. We've had to increase that to 5 just to get through the initial demand that we've got by seconding officers from other areas of operational policing into that area of business to get us through this initial demand. And of course we'll continue to monitor that demand and scale that staffing back as we process the animals that are in. There's the limited kennel space, and as I know you know, there is a national shortage of kennel space in the UK, and other forces are suffering from this problem far more acutely than West Yorkshire are, given that we have a facility that's allowed us to house a significant number of banned breeds.
Very prescient.
Sorry?
Very prescient of West Yorkshire Police to purchase that facility.
Yeah. We've got plans to ensure that West Yorkshire Police have got access to sufficient kennel capacity, and we are consistently monitoring the animals in and out. The third challenge is the criminal justice system. So in many areas of the UK there have been specific courts held to process the dangerous dogs seized under the XL bully legislation. We haven't seen that in West Yorkshire yet. But as we realised that this was an option for us, we began liaison with criminal justice executives recently and are hopeful that the courts will be put on to help us get over that volume. It's currently taking between 18 to 24 months in West Yorkshire to have a case heard, and obviously during that time we're having to house the animals, which causes a backlog on the streets and an inability for us to support other forces.
Yeah, and of course the public won't know that West Yorkshire Police bears the cost of that. And there is no facility to recharge the dog owner. Something that we're going to be raising with the government and the Home Secretary, because clearly this is the
system's broken.
Yeah, the system is broken.
Absolutely.
I note a contingent destruction order that which means that the dog is returned to the owner, but they must comply with certain conditions. For example, the dog is always muzzled or kept in a secure garden. Who ensures that this contingent destruction order is upheld, and what percentage of cases are reinvestigated for non-compliance?
So West Yorkshire Police are responsible for the monitoring and investigation around any breaches of those orders, but we are intelligence-led and rely largely on reports from members of the public in relation to that. What we can say around the orders is the people who have these orders are generally our more responsible dog owners, because they are the ones who have come forward to the authorities at the appropriate time, informed us that they own one of these animals and have asked for the order to be put in place so they can keep their animals. It's 1 to 2% of CDOs are re-investigated for non-compliance based on current.
Right, thank you very much. So one of the reasons West Yorkshire Police bought a facility was obviously to manage their costs, but also to income generate. And obviously, we now know that the new legislation has massively overwhelmed all facilities. But I wondered if that vision of an income generator was still live, and whether we had indeed started to offer out kennel spaces to other forces at cost, well, obviously, plus a bit of profit, because the West Yorkshire public need income generation, don't they?
So it's very much still in train. We have surrounding forces who are still standing by to utilise the West Yorkshire facility as we get greater capacity, but clearly at the moment that capacity is extremely limited based on the numbers of West Yorkshire dogs that we need to deal with. We are renting kennel space to South Yorkshire Police. At the moment it averages at £7,600 per month income generation, which is obviously significantly reduced based on the number of animals that we are housing from West Yorkshire. So every time we move out a dog that we're housing on behalf of South Yorkshire, we now have to replace that with one that we need to bring in from West Yorkshire. So there's been a reduction over the years over the number of kennels that we've been able to rent out to surrounding forces. Hopefully, as the legislation settles and we've dealt with more animals, then we will start to reverse that trend and rent out more kennels. We've certainly spoken to other forces who are struggling for capacity and would like to use our facility.
Yeah, and we just need to get to a full cost recovery model where we can charge the public, and then the public can decide to own these dogs or not, knowing the consequences to their purse. Anything you wanted to add, Chief Constable?
No, I think that would have been an amazing facility, self-generating, self-funding, and an income generator, had it not been for the changes in legislation. The law's a law, we have to comply with it, we'll deal with it, but as you've identified, it's got some significant cost to us. We'd really welcome your support with criminal justice partners to put on some specific courts, because if we can just get through that process, I'm sure there's magistrates who are willing to do it. It's just the facilities and a magistrate's court service to service them, and then the team can be off and running.
Yeah, so in my role as chair of the local criminal justice board, I'll definitely pick that up with Pat Twiggs and our office, and I can see that Sharon's taking notes, so we'll pick that up outside of this meeting.
Thank you.
But we'll also raise it with the Home Secretary because it is unbelievable that every force in the country is housing, feeding, warming members of the public's dogs for free.
So just going back to the first, just like a broken record, the first question is, we have 2 officers who are specifically trained in this legislation, and we need them to identify and say that's an XL bully or that's this dog, and the courts work through that process. We've now got to have 5, so that's 3 more people have been taken off the street somewhere to do that. I'm not saying they've come out of a neighbourhood policing team, they've come from somewhere, and so the organisation is, you know, we can really do without that.
Yeah, well, there's lots of costs associated with this legislation, and we need to have a common sense approach to who's paying for those changes. Because currently it's all one way, isn't it? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
We're on to hate crime now. Damien, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Assistant Chief Constable Damien Miller, lead for local policing and safeguarding.
Thank you. So this is now a regular 6-monthly paper for those people at home who are wondering why this is suddenly on the agenda, because it's the first time that we've formally discussed it in this setting. We discussed it in lots of other settings, of course. So question 1, the report states that the number of hate crimes recorded in the last 12 months to August 24 have increased by 1.5% from the previous 12 months, and that the recent increases in 2024 are predominantly due to the sharp increase in reporting of anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic incidents, alongside the decrease in reports from other strands. How has this impacted victim satisfaction, especially those reporting anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic incidents?
Right, so as it currently stands with regards to victim satisfaction, we can't break out the data for different, obviously with regards to anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic hate crime. What I can say is, unfortunately, our overall hate crime satisfaction has fallen by 4.6%. That isn't classed as statistically significant, however, it's the wrong direction for myself. When you then look into it and actually get into the detail, so even though we've dropped by 4.6%, where we have seen increased performance is around ease of contact, that's up by 6.1%, being kept informed of progress once the crime has been reported, and the regular contact by police has increased by 7.6%, and treatment by 4.9%. Where we've got the slight issue as it stands at this moment in time is where we're dealing with incidents of hate crime over the phone. It's an investigation that's been taken over the phone, and that's where we've seen the decrease by 8.6%. So we've done lots of developments as part of our overall victim satisfaction action plan, and the key piece of work that we've been doing is in relation to our remote resolution teams, so those teams that deal with it over the phone. With the software that we've now got with regards to Good Sam, we can actually do that lifetime video call with the victim, and what we're seeing with that is that's now having more of a longer term positive impact on that satisfaction. So when you look at the rolling charts, you can just see for the last month, which goes up to October of this year, just to start to see that increase. I'm hoping that's going to be a prolonged increase.
Yeah, and of course the pilot that was rolled out in Wakefield saw a 7% increase over about a 6-month period, I understand. So it's definitely something that I'm very alive to, and I'm hoping it's going to be a game changer. So and I've reported it to the Home Office as potentially a game changer. So all eyes are on you, just so you know.
Good.
I know that regarding faith-related incidents, there has been a 47.9% increase in incidents recorded against Islamic Muslim faith. Incidents relating to the Jewish faith have seen a 186.3% increase from the previous rate 12 months ago. Can you say more about the nature of the main categories of incidents? For example, are they public order, stalking and harassment, and how are you tackling the increase?
Yeah, so when you break it down, if you look at the anti-Jewish crimes that we've recorded, the main 2 areas are public order offences. So we've got Within that, a 259% increase, which basically means a change of 87 offences that have been reported. And then stalking and harassment is the second largest one with a 145% increase, which is a change of 29 offences. When you then look into anti-Muslim, it's exactly the same again with regards to public order being the top one, stalking and harassment. But when you look at the changes there, it's a 48% increase for public order offences, which is a change of 87, and stalking and harassment 52.3% increase, which is a change of 46. Going back to the other point of the question, which is what we were doing to tackle this, the ongoing work around JOSCIL, which has been our response, ensured that all hate crimes were reviewed by a dedicated team daily. So in that, we've got a detective sergeant and 2 detective constables that will review all those within the gold room to ensure that the level of investigation is at the highest level to what's required with regards to what's being reported to us. And that approach has helped us to utilise and assist in reducing further offences, bringing offenders to justice, and also protecting victims, which is the key response that we need to do as police in relation to that. So we are still overseeing that with that dedicated wrap-round service that we've got, and then obviously that's then feeding into the MPT and partnership teams as well, just so they're aware of the offences that are being reported, but also that increased engagement with community groups as well, and working with those to help increase the actual level of reporting, because we still want to make sure that the reports are coming through, and we know not everybody is still reporting all offences to us, and we want to make sure we get everything across, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it.
Absolutely, and of course Tracy and I have met many community members from both the Muslim and Jewish communities since those terrible events last October, and trust and confidence in policing and the processes that you're undertaking have been issues that have been raised with us, and generally speaking very positive experiences, as I've fed back to you on several occasions, but areas like evidential difficulties, not being able to discover alleged perpetrators is an issue, and this has been the case in 34% of finalised cases. Just to give some understanding to the public who may be watching, can you explain what evidential difficulties mean around these faith-related incidents and what you're doing about it?
Yeah, so we basically we can break those down. So when we look at that 35%, when you look at those for public order offences, that breaks down to 0.4% of those where no suspect was identified either by the victim or through our own policing inquiries, so we've not been able to identify them. 16.1% being due to the victim, even though the report has been made to us, they declined that they don't want to basically prosecute in those cases, which is obviously the victim's choice. And then the largest percentage of that is 23.7%, where the investigation, we have identified a suspect, however, either due to a lack of evidence or an unrealistic prospect of a prosecution, the investigation was discontinued. So that's where our largest percentage is. So some of the work that we've been doing around there to increase those offences brought to justice, we've been working on a word-on-word pilot. So it's basically Operation C-Time. So where it's word-on-word, in the past, that potentially would not have led to a prosecution. But when we're looking at the suspect, and if they've got previous convictions, we're then taking that through to CPS, and that's seeing at the moment some increased convictions of defendants there.
Good. I'm glad to see that proactivity.
Deputy Mayor, I mean, it's just a wider point when in the figures of evidential difficulty, doesn't necessarily mean we've done our job badly. It just might be we've gathered all the evidence there is, but as far as the prosecutors are concerned, it's insufficient to enable a realistic prospect of a conviction at court. So the evidence might be the evidence and that's it, but sometimes I'm slightly defensive of it because it often appears as though the police haven't got the evidence, they haven't got the right amount of evidence. Sometimes that is it, but to be fair to the CPS and the prosecutors, their assessment is that's still not sufficient to get a realistic prospect of a conviction.
Yeah, and obviously we know that happens for all crime types, including rape.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a battle that we continue to fight. Although I do accept that 16% of those numbers didn't want to take it further, so we've got to also take that into account. I can see that the repeat victim rates have dropped across the board. Do you know why that's the case?
Yeah, so there's obviously some really good hard work undertaken by officers and staff within West Yorkshire. So we've got the hate crime coordinators, so they proactively support victims of hate crime, managing problem solving actions for ongoing repeats, and to basically support them to prevent them from being victims in the future. We've got Operation Seatown, which I've mentioned, which is the word-on-word pilot that we're working with CPS. We've got hate crime coordinators who contact victims as soon as possible to provide that support, advice and complete referrals as well to partner agencies where it's required. I've got the continuous improvement teams across the districts as well, and they're assisting with 24-hour reviews of hate crimes just to make sure that we're getting the repeat calls back to the victims as soon as possible. And again, checking if any referrals need to be made. We've got hate crime coordinators. They do reviews of finalised crimes as well to understand the level of investigation, what was offered, has that level of investigation been to the right quality, and then obviously ringing back the victim as well to see if there's anything further that we can do. We've spent a lot of time upskilling our supervisors and staff around investigation standards and the expectations thereof of the hate crime coordinators. And also the hate crime coordinators monitor and review crimes for any opportunities for out-of-court disposals as well. So I think with everything that we're doing, that's why we're seeing that fall with regards to repeat victims.
Yeah, thank you. We know, of course, that as a result of investment from the Home Office, investment from the public of West Yorkshire through the precept, we were able to deliver the Mayor's mayoral pledge to bring in over 750 more police officers and staff, which is brilliant. And I know that as a result of that, you've been able to double the number of hate crime coordinators across West Yorkshire, many of whom I've met and I talk to regularly. You're doing some great things in this space. What are the opportunities for you to promote some of the work that you're doing? Anything we can support with you in that? Because obviously we need the public to have confidence in your response to report hate crime. We don't want there to be a reduction in hate crime reporting because people are not telling us. We want people to feel that they've got, that they've got a chance of being listened to and that action will be taken. So how can we help you?
Yeah, so we've got our community alert engagement tracker that we've been running as a pilot, and we're going to roll that out in January. So that's that two-way interface that we can have with the community. So we'll be able to publicise everything that we're doing on that. We also publicise our scrutiny panels, PAC meetings as well, and also MPT and hate crime coordinators, any engagement events that they go to. We've got district tactical plans, which are engagement plans which are refreshed every 3 months with regards to how they feed out locally that information, that good practice, and that also rolls into our force engagement plan as well, where we look to promote the priorities of what we're doing. Are we perfect? Are we getting everything out there? No. I would welcome any assistance just to get that reach even further into the communities, because again, I go back to the point I made earlier, the more people have the faith in reporting, the more we will understand.
Yeah, brilliant. And of course, the Mayor's Safer Communities Fund is a brilliant opportunity for those tiny grassroots organisations we spoke about earlier to bid for projects to support reporting of hate crime. We've already spent over £400,000 on the Mayor's Safer Communities Fund for projects that are already supporting hate crime victims. So yeah, we're going to definitely come back to you afterwards to understand how we can bring those two strands of work together and then look at what other opportunities there are for us to do more, because we want to eliminate hate crime here in West Yorkshire, and the best we can work together will, I think, help us to deliver that objective. Thank you. So we're on to neighbourhood policing and antisocial behaviour, which I know you're also going to be speaking on. Thank you for the report, which again for the public is available on the website. So the first question, neighbourhood policing teams staffing, police officers and police staff actuals remain lower than the budgeted position, which obviously you have reported regularly to Tracy and myself. Do you see this position improving?
Yes, and it has improved since last time I was here. So if you remember when I came back in June with this paper, I at that time reported that we had 57 vacancies for police officers and 43.5 for PCSOs. Obviously in the latest paper we're down to 25 vacancies for PCs. Not so dissimilar for PCSOs, which is 44, so we're heading in the right direction. The force has got plans to recruit over 800 officers as well as transferees over the next 2 financial years, and we've already got 96 that are currently in their initial training, which will soon be allocated to districts. So if I go back to what I said in June, we were looking to reach our full budget numbers by early next year, and we're still on track to do that.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing that position being achieved. Noting that West Yorkshire Police received the Herman Goldstein Award regarding Operation Vulcan, I'm sure the public would love to know what Operation Vulcan is, what the model is and how you've implemented it.
Right, we obviously need to write the paper better because it wasn't us. Unfortunately, it was Greater Manchester Police, but we do look at best practice everywhere. So that's if it isn't created in West Yorkshire, we still look elsewhere. So we were really lucky to have an officer who came across from GMP to West Yorkshire on promotion, Chief Inspector May Preston,
I've met.
of Calderdale. Yeah, she's doing a fantastic job. And when she came across, she talked about Operation Vulcan and the successes that it had. So what we wanted to do was try it here within West Yorkshire. So it's called Operation Orion because we've got to call it something different within West Yorkshire.
I've been out to show me what she's done, but tell the public.
So there's some really good results, and that isn't just us, it's a partnership approach. So we started it in July, 3 months to October. What we've seen is 62 arrests, 121 offences, 39 charges, 20 warrants executed and 10 closure orders under the Antisocial Behaviour and Crime Policing Act. And it's under evaluation as we speak, and what we're looking to do is have that evaluation that's going to come back in the new year for us to then look at how do we actually do that in other areas of West Yorkshire. And what that's looked at is addressing some key antisocial behaviour problems within Calderdale, certainly around the centre in the main area, to make it a hostile zone to those criminals. And as I say, with the results that we've had, it's had some real good positive impact.
Yeah. And I went to Calderdale with May and I walked around and she showed us some of the successes. So yeah, I thought that was something that we needed to tell the public about because again, you're a bit shy sometimes when you're doing great stuff. Do you have a view on why antisocial behaviour numbers appear to be rising? Is that an increase in reporting or increase in actual ASB?
So it's probably a bit of both, if I'm perfectly honest. It's the increase, but the increase in reporting as well, because obviously if it's not reported, we can't crime it. When you look at it and actually go into the detail, it's small increases with regards to when you look at the call types, fireworks and snowballing. So obviously the recent snow will have helped in relation to that. Nuisance cars and vans, nuisance motorcycle, quad bikes, and adult nuisance, which is non-alcohol related. However, when you look at the largest increase of those 4 areas, it is in relation to nuisance motorcycle and quad bikes. That for me isn't surprising because we've had a wide focus on it and certainly used the Safer Street funds as well with regards to addressing that. So we were anticipating an increase because obviously we've publicised that as well as publicising the work that we've done around it and wanted to get that increased reporting so we could actually then take enforcement action. So at the moment it's down to that, but there's just a couple of other areas we've just had some real small slight increases.
Yeah, and that certainly correlates with the feedback that we get from the public, that their number one concern about antisocial behaviour is that off-road motorcycles, social use of motor vehicles is definitely the number one, which is why of course the Mayor's invested so many hundreds of thousands into improving the number of bikes and the training and all the rest of it. And of course I went to see the Leeds team, but we're very impressed that I've got a full motorbike licence. Not that I'll ever get on a bike again, but it was great to see the work they've done and the fact that they've reduced antisocial behaviour by use of motorbike by 22%. And I think that great work again should be celebrated because they're doing some amazing things, although much more to do of course. And that's one of the upsides I think of the data that shows us there's been a decrease across West Yorkshire relating to youth related ASB, because obviously they're the ones often riding these off-road bikes, etc. But disturbingly we've got an increase in Wakefield, and I wondered what your understanding of that was.
Yeah, so that's a 3.9% increase in Wakefield, and that's in relation to youth-related antisocial behaviour. So that's up 68 incidents when you look back the 12 months to August. So when you then go and delve into that detail, so we've had a couple of issues there. So the first one was in relation to a specific issue within Castleford. So we had 2 youths who were linked to antisocial behaviour who have been moved into that area from an outer area. However, the work that we've done with our partners, those 2 have since been moved out, and the reporting numbers have returned back to what was the level pre those coming into the area. We've then had Operation Massville. So that was launched to target antisocial behaviour and crime in the Castleford locality. So we've had a dedicated focused deterrent car, and that's deployed Monday through to Fridays to target youth ASB. We've then had an issue at Wakefield and Pontefract bus stations, and again that was in relation to youth ASB. What didn't help us there is we did lose our 2 safe for travel PCSOs. Thankfully we've recruited 2 more and got them in place now, so again with the support with the wider partnership, that increase has gone back to previous levels as well. And basically what we've done is we've looked at problem solving plans as well, because we've got a number of shopping complexes across the southeast and west of that district, and again linking in with the businesses, local authorities. We've been able to hand out acceptable behaviour contracts and tenancy breaches as well, linking in with the housing in that area to look at some of the tactical options. So what we've actually seen is the reports return back to normal or pre-normal levels.
Yeah, that's good to know. And obviously it's worth pointing out to those members of the public watching that the Safer Travel team, the PCSO, is wholly funded by the Mayor, using her bus service improvement money, of course. The latest report that I saw, antisocial behaviour on the buses reduced 11%. So actually that investment in that Safer Travel team is really delivering dividends for the public, and hopefully increasing trust and confidence in that bus network, which is what the purpose of it is. And again, thanks to West Yorkshire Police, because it's a great partnership. I should also mention that the money for the training came from Morrison's, so another great partnership there. But what can we say to, with some great stuff, but what can we say to those members of the public who feel that they've got long-term antisocial behaviour issues in their communities and they're not really getting the outcome that they want from the police?
Yeah, so obviously tackling antisocial behaviour still remains a priority for us in West Yorkshire Police. As you've had from previous reports, we have invested not only in antisocial behaviour teams, but in our neighbourhood policing teams as well, hence why you hold me to account to make sure we get all those officers on the seats and staff. So it's resulted in continued determination to use extensive powers. So what we do look at is the wide use of powers that we've got, whether that's premise closure orders, dispersal orders, acceptable behaviour contracts, etc., to make neighbourhoods safer. We've also been captured within the recent HMIC FSRS appeal report as well, and also in the ASB Spotlight report as well, with regards to the work that we're doing using injunctions to take people's bikes away, like we've mentioned, for the off-road use in motorcycles and quads. We were also mentioned with regards to our ASVAT system as well, which showed us promising practice, and that basically we look every day at ASB reports and a number of other crime reports that could be masked as ASB, and make sure people are repeat victims. If people are reporting multiple offences, we're then getting back in contact, making sure that the approach that we've taken is to the highest standard at the best of the time, and also referring to partner agencies as well where that's appropriate. We've got the ASB case review as well, which was previously known as the community trigger as well. So what that allows people to do within the public is, if they feel that they've been a victim of ASB on at least 3 occasions within the last 6 months, that they can raise that with us for that to be re-looked at, to make sure that we've dealt with those incidents to the highest measure, and also linking with our local authorities as well to make sure that they've taken appropriate action if it's needed, whether that's local authority, housing, etc. So what I would encourage people to do is report any antisocial behaviour, because again, it goes back to what I said about the hate crime. If it isn't reported, I don't know about it, and my officers and staff can't take any action, so please report it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned housing associations, RSLs, and other housing providers, local authorities, because I think that's sometimes key to achieving positive outcomes for the public. What can we do together? The Mayor and I, the Mayor was at a meeting with RSLs this morning, for example, and the call to action is, let's work better together. What do we need to do to enable that closer relationship between policing and housing providers?
Right, when you look across the 5 districts, I think we've actually got a really effective partnership with our housing providers, successful use of civil orders, antisocial behaviours, but it goes wider than that as well, because obviously we've got the private housing providers as well, or some people who are just properties landlords, and that's where we need to spread that. So for me, it's a bit like the work that we do within the business community, probably bringing them together in a group, and how we can hold, whether it's a quarterly meeting, which I'm more than happy to be involved with, because we need to make sure that they're well aware of the powers that they can use. But obviously sometimes the private providers don't want to do that, because obviously it's financial impact on those. But within the local authorities and the bigger housing providers, we've got a really good working relationship.
Yeah, I'm aware of some work you do with a private sector landlord in Halifax, for example, so I've seen that working firsthand. And there is legislation around drug house, it didn't used to be called that, drug house closures, and and obviously we want to support that, but we'll go away and think about how we can work with our local authority partners to coordinate those private sector spaces to talk about responsibilities of private landlords, because I think that is the key. Thank you. Going over now to Stop and Search. Again, this is a regular paper, last discussed in June 24. The first question is, well, I'd just like to comment that I'm pleased to see the value that West Yorkshire Police is putting on scrutiny panels, including the implementation of a youth panel. In fact, we've met some young people recently, Sharon and I, and we've given them your contact details because we want them to apply to be on that scrutiny panel.
Get ready.
They are impressive young people, so yeah, absolutely get ready. Could I ask more detail about the number of cases reviewed by the panels, the feedback received by West Yorkshire Police, and how you share their findings to increase reassurance?
Yeah, so between January and June of this year, there's been 74 cases that have been reviewed in total by the West Yorkshire Police scrutiny panels. The way the feedback works is we've got an online portal. So at the end of each cycle of the panels, the information is reviewed and assessed by local policing, and that captures any organisational learning, whether that's developmental for officers, or if that's feedback that we need to look at with a wider issue with regards to force policy or anything like that. Sharing then the wider organisational learning, that is shared internally with the relevant stakeholders, and within that is obviously our public order training, who deliver the training up at our learning development centre. And also local policing collate any findings, feedbacks, actions within the newsletter that we publish as well through local policing. Moving forward, what we want to then do is share that on our community alert forum as well, which is obviously our external media site. One of the things I'm key about is 74 cases for me between January and June. Not too many cases, so what we need to actually do is increase the size and scale of our scrutiny groups. So we've already put a message out using our community alert, which is the first time we've done it, to increase the take-up with regards to scrutiny panels, and we've had over 100 people register interest. So hopefully we'll be able to actually increase the size and scales of our scrutiny panels so we can get more scrutiny with regards to the stop searches that we're undertaking.
Brilliant. And of course, I attended one of the panels and saw firsthand some of the good work. They were very challenging to the police, which was good to see.
And that's how it should be.
But there was also some really good practice evidenced as well through the body-worn video, so that was also good to see.
Excellent.
So thanks for the breakdown of EIP, exposure of intimate parts searches of children, which is something that we're really keen to see, and something that I'm personally very interested in, as is the Mayor. The fact that numbers are low and that in all cases public protection notices are now being sent to the local authority is really appreciated, and we know that they're conducted rarely, although I note on the data that of 1,410, I haven't got my glasses so I can't quite see them very, very well, 428 of the people, the children who have been stopped are non-white, so that's nearly a third. So that is concerning, that disproportionality is still there. Yeah, no, I don't think they'll work, but thank you. But yeah, 428 out of the total, 1,470. Yeah, so just wanted to note that that is a concern to us. And for the search exposing body parts, 3 out of the 4 children are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, or Black and Asian backgrounds in this case. And I know that the explanation of those 4 cases, I presume that these 4 are those 4. That you only actually had a positive outcome in 1 of those 4 cases, so that's 3 children traumatised and only 1 who carried drugs.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's important to the public that we know that they know that we're noting and noticing these trends and ask again what you're doing about it. I know that we're now going to have this new scrutiny panel and we're going to involve children in that, and it's that's good, but it's still a concern that children are being searched and that Black children are being disproportionately searched.
Yeah. And obviously part of this is obviously disclosing the data, so we're really open and honest, so we can have that frank and open conversation. We've delivered training in relation to stop and search, and we've just developed a new iLearn for officers as well. It's going to have to be completed every year prior to them going to undertake their officer safety training as well, where we've now it's a 2-day course which also includes stop and search. And within that, there's actually role plays, and the feedback that we're getting from those role plays from officers is it's really, really helpful for them to form their understanding. We've obviously widened the mnemonic as well. We've brought in the QR codes as well for people to report back. And as I say, I am looking to extend that scrutiny panel so we can scrutinise more stop and search. But the data speaks for itself at the moment. There is that disproportionality, and what we want to do is drive that down.
Yeah, because you need to get that proper engagement from the public, and looking at the find rate later on in the report on page 4, it's still relatively low, around 30%, so that's 70% of people being stopped where you're not finding anything, and the chance of losing trust and confidence in those communities, of course, is very high when we know that 2.8 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're Black than if you're a white person. So actually the loss of that capital from the public is I think a massive issue for West Yorkshire Police. So how are you improving the intelligence around who you're stopping and searching? Because if you improve that, you'll stop more people with drugs, guns, knives, whatever it is, and that's what we all want.
Yeah, what is pleasing within the report, because even though, as you say, the fine rate has improved ever so slightly, that's against a lower number of stop and searches
that 345,
that we've done. So there is positives within and amongst that. So what we are doing with regards to that intelligence picture, we have done lots with regards to the hotspots that we need to police, certainly through the Gemlock piece of work that we're doing. We're obviously widening that to antisocial behaviour now. So the briefings going out to the officers and staff are really clear with regards to what's going on within those communities. We're trying to encourage communities to obviously provide that intelligence as well, because they are our eyes and ears. So the more that we can get out of communities to help us, we'll make sure that we're actually stop and searching in the right circumstances rather than what may be considered to be the wrong circumstances in relation to that. We've also then got the process with regards to the scrutinising of those stop and searches that take place, as well as the scrutiny panels. We also have the supervisory panels in place as well, so those will be checked by a supervisory officer. And you've already mentioned what's really key for us in that check-in process is the body-worn video, to make sure that what is on that stop and search document is really clear with regards to the grounds for that search, but also the conduct of the officer with that member of the public.
Yeah, and obviously what the public in West Yorkshire won't know is every stop and search of someone from a Black minority ethnic background is overseen by a supervisor.
Yep.
So that is something that is quite rare in policing, and not many other forces do that, so it's good. Yeah, I'll come on to that.
Okay.
But just on the question of searches of children. Can you just confirm whether you've included searches after arrest or those that take place in police custody?
Not within this documentation, because that falls outside of obviously the stop and search legislation, so that will be picked up with regards to custody, with regards to those facts. If you need that information, then obviously we can provide it.
Because we want to make sure that we're getting all the relevant information, because if there's more disproportionality, we need to know about it, don't we? If there's less, then that's good.
I think we've reported on it previously, but I suppose this was about stop and search.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and yes, actually, in the last report. So, good. Just confirming. So it's good to see the increasing use of the QR code on search records, and I know that other forces who have started using this are not getting as good outcomes as we're getting. What proportion of records currently result in feedback to the force through the QR code?
So again, going back to that January-June figure, so we had 53 hits because we can actually see how many people have gone from the QR code to actually the site itself. But from then the site to who've completed it, we've had 31 surveys that which are being completed, and obviously we've linked in with West Mids who do a similar thing, and they actually say that's really encouraging figures with regards to what we've had so far. We're continuing to raise awareness with regards to the QR codes and the officers training in relation to that as well. And what's really pleasing, when you go into the feedback from those QR codes, so we've got 74.3% say the stops and search conducted in a professional manner by the officer, 77% treated with respect by the officer, and 75.7% treated fairly as well. So they, for me, it's early days, but pleasing returns in relation to what's coming back on there, but we need more. So again, officers are still being encouraged, and we've provided a change to the stop and search form now, which has a copy of the QR code on there as well. So hopefully that will increase feedback submission as well.
Brilliant. We'll wait and see. Given the number of stop and searches in the last 6 months, just under 9,500 versus the number of complaints, 9, are you concerned about the lack of confidence in reporting complaints compared to public feedback on this issue?
Right, so obviously I could sit here and say no, but I think in all areas we can get better. So what's pleasing, as you can see within the report, when you look at those complaints, very few are upheld. And again, as you mentioned, we go back to the body worn, we can look at the body worn, and we can see from there. We've brought in the QR code as well. As I say, we changed the mnemonic, so we've got that mnemonic extended now to cover complaints. We've put it onto the stop and search form as well, which we called the Form 180. We've updated our websites as well with regards to how people can make complaints externally, and also we have our scrutiny mechanisms in place. As I said previously, I would like to extend those scrutiny mechanisms as well, so we can actually get through more stop and search records, because when I talk about how many we've got through compared to how many stop searches, it's not a high percentage, so I want to increase that. And we've also got that supervisory review within place as well. So I think we've got lots of different mechanisms in place, but what I need to make sure is that people feel that if they want to complain, they know how to complain, and they feel reassured that they can make that complaint, and then that will be investigated to the highest standard.
Thank you. And I've read the 9 complaints and know that 2 are ongoing. I'd really like to know the outcome of those 2.
We, as I've said in the last report, we'll always bring those back in the preceding report.
Yeah, because they look very interesting. But my one concern is that actually people are not complaining about being handcuffed. And I'm really worried that more and more people who are stopped and searched are being handcuffed. And I worry that we're getting more and more like the Met et al. And I wonder what work we're doing on helping police officers to stop and search in a way that is commensurate with our values here in West Yorkshire.
Yeah, so what we've done is part of that training package I mentioned, there's a massive piece on there with regards to handcuffing, the legislation that you can use in certain circumstances if the circumstances are right. So as I say, every officer now needs to complete that every single year before they go and do their training. So that will be monitored, and that will be monitored through our local accountability meeting structure as well. What we also have in place with regards to the reassurance board that I chair, we now did sample at every board 25 stop and searches where handcuffs have been used to see if that was justified, and obviously then provide feedback through that process as well. We've changed the form as well and the use of force forms to include handcuffing at stop and searches as well. So we've got another measure there, and we're about to set up under ACC Rob McCoubry a use of force board as well, where this will be monitored and maintained going forward as well.
Yeah.
And just for the record, there's less and less use of handcuffs of searching in West Yorkshire. So, you know, over 70% have not got handcuffs in.
Good. And it's that good practice that we want to build upon, so that those officers who, for whatever reason, feel that use of handcuffs is required, speak to those officers who are confident that it's not. Especially when you've got a 14-year-old who is completely innocent, stopped and searched, and handcuffs are used on a 14-year-old child. You know, it's not in our values.
No, it is,
system,
and again, I should have actually said, with regards to that refreshed training now, with regards to their skills each year, those role players include stop and searching and when and where handcuffs can and can't be used in those
or should and shouldn't be used.
Yeah.
Even better. Thanks. We know that Greater Manchester Police have now ended welfare exposure of intimate part searches of people in custody. Just wondered if West Yorkshire Police were aware of this and whether or not you considered doing something similar. Do you feel like you could liaise with GMP and have a chat about how that's working there?
Yeah, so obviously what that is, it sits outside stop and search, because obviously it comes back to the custody. So if we just put
We have to wait 6 months for next time to talk.
Put that to one side. But what they're doing, we have a slightly different approach within West Yorkshire, because what we would prefer to do is actually place the detainees under constant supervision rather than actually doing the search itself. So we have a similar process as such, but it just reduces the chances of that person being searched and intimate parts being exposed, as the case may be.
To my knowledge, it's not something we do in West Yorkshire. That was something that's been picked up from some quite significant cases in GMP. So we'll have a look and see what it is, but we don't do that. We do it about harm to themselves or illegal articles.
So rather than do that intimate body search, you keep them under surveillance. Yeah, and that's obviously something we would prefer. Thank you. So that's the final question on that item. We move on then to safeguarding adults. And the report mentions that there are occasions where there are no spaces available in secure accommodation to safely accommodate people who are experiencing a mental health crisis and need to be moved to a place of safety. How does this demand for secure accommodation exceed the number of spaces available in West Yorkshire districts?
Right, unfortunately this is one where I can actually provide specific information, because what we've got is the issue that health don't retain the data as it stands at this moment in time. They see that as a gap on their side. And also on the flip side of that is we've updated our handhelds so we can actually capture the data. But if I'm perfectly honest, the officers aren't recording it to the best of their ability. So this has just recently been through the district local accountability meeting process, because we want to improve this so we can capture it. Because what the data would suggest is over the last 12 months, 28% of all 136 detentions have been taken to A&E. Now, what I can't tell is from that 28%, is that for a genuine reason because they've got something, a physical reason to be there, or is it a case of that there isn't the space available? So we do work in partnership. We both accept that both our data isn't the best, and what we're doing is actually working to address that gap. So I'm hoping in the near future, not only from the updates that we've given to the officers on the handheld, but also data then capturing health capturing the data in future, we will be able to actually come back to you with a figure to say, on this amount of occasions, the beds haven't been available, hence why it's been the individual's been taken to A&E.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that'll be helpful information, because then we can push the system elsewhere.
Yeah.
We've got a relationship with the ICB through Rob Webster, and something that we can raise with them. Yeah, and Tracy's on the board of the ICB, so I think it's really helpful for us to, have those conversations and put that challenge there.
I think we'd welcome that, because some of our understanding is that each mental health unit is licensed to have so many people in it. and when they reach their licence number, they close the doors. So all that means is the person's sitting outside with a police officer. I'm not so sure that's the safest, best place for them. They'd be better to be inside the door, whereas they won't let them in. It's not just that they haven't got enough staff, and so the system is working against it, and the people who are suffering are the people with mental health crisis and the public, because police officers are sitting with them. The only alternative place we can take them to is A&E, and they don't receive them. They say, you're not bringing them here, you should bring them elsewhere. And it's only if they've got physical injuries. So the sad thing is the pressure is just being moved out of cell areas into waiting areas outside mental health units. And I don't criticise the people inside the door, but it's not best for the patient. That's what we can't get our head around. It's the best place is for a professional to be with them, not police officers in uniform.
No, I agree, and I think that the people inside the mental health facilities are not the decision makers either. So so I think the ICB is the best place to take that. So we'll pick this up outside of this meeting to understand what more we can do. It might need the data to support that conversation, but I think it's worthwhile.
I have to say the data is getting better. It's just not 100% as it stands at this moment in time.
Well, when we've got confidence,
hence why
we'll
we
have
push
a
through
stronger
the local
argument.
accountability meetings.
Good, thank you. The report mentions that digital policing are currently developing an app designed to improve referrals to support agencies for vulnerable adults who do not meet the threshold for an adult at risk. Can you explain how West Yorkshire Police currently decide whether a case meets the at-risk threshold and who is being engaged with during the consultation phase of the app project?
Yeah, so we use the Care Act of 2014, so there's a clear definition within that. So it's any person over the age of 18 who has care and support needs, is experiencing or is at risk of abuse or neglect, or is unable to protect themselves because of their care and support needs. So that is quite a high threshold, as you can imagine. So what we're looking at is anything below that threshold, and how do we then help and support those as individuals. So obviously officers and staff attending those incidents will look at that Care Act guidance, and if the criteria falls below that, what we're trying to do through the app that we want to create is then being able to refer them to appropriate agencies, obviously outside of policing, because policing isn't where they need to be as it stands at this moment in time. So as it stands at this moment in time, the initial conversations so far have been internally, because we've been discussing with digital with regards to how can we build the app, and then what we want to then do is go to that wider district conversation with our partners, because the setups that we've got within each local authority area is different, so we've got to be able to design an app that will work in each of those areas, so we're then able to automatically refer through to the relevant agency within the local authority that person has been in contact with the police. So we will look to establish as wide a group as possible and seek people's expertise with regards to who is best placed to be sat on that and those referral agencies.
Thank you. I would be very interested in, supporting that process and identifying any suitable people, because obviously I'm thinking of Neil Flenley, for example, in our team, who leads on safeguarding and these other adjunct areas. Page 7 of the report describes how there is an increase in recorded cases of stalking. Can you tell us more about how a case is escalated to an application for a stalking protection order, and how long that application usually takes before an order is issued?
Yeah, so the way it works is it's either identified by the officer in the case in the first instance that one may or may not be needed. And then we also have our stalking coordination unit, which you're aware of, Deputy Mayor as well, and they will review that crime also, and if they feel that one is necessary, they'll then make contact with the OIC. What happens then is the OIC does a referral form through to our legal services, because it's obviously quite a key legal part of that, and they will seek advice on that part. If the legal service at that part agree that one is suitable, there is then an application process that's got to take place, so that officer's then got to approach the superintendent for authorisation in that case. Once that authority has been obtained and completed, we then need an overarching statement, and this is quite a lengthy process, because with regards to the level of detail that is required to get through the legal process, that is quite a detailed statement, and this is where we have been getting some of the delays, because once that's returned to legal, they will start to prepare the case, and present the application at court. So when you look back at the ones that we've done up until this point, when you look at the mean average, it's taken 103 days from start to application, which for me is far too long. So what we've done over recent months to look at how do we shorten that process down, we've had key meetings between safeguarding governance and legal services to look at how do we shorten the time for that initial legal advice, and what we've been able to do is reduce that significantly over recent months. On an average, have got that down to within a month. And now what we're also looking at is how do we speed up the other delay, which is in relation to those officers completing the statement. So what I'm now looking at is, do I provide the staffing within that stalking prevention unit to actually assist with taking those statements? But obviously that looks at moving staff from somewhere, because I don't have people ready sat behind to deploy into that. But I think by upskilling those officers who take those statements, what we'll be able to do is speed up that process. So we've done the initial bit, which is reducing the legal services timeline. We just now need to reduce how long it takes to provide that statement. And what I would like to do is, when we bring this back again, is hopefully provide that update that as it stands at this moment in time, it's 103 days. I'd like to bring that significantly down.
Yeah, and I wonder what other forces are doing. So Sussex have been particularly successful under the leadership of Katie Bourne, of course, the PCC there. And I also wonder if the threshold for gaining an SPO is too high, and whether or not we should again be having conversations with Shabana Mahmood's office about that, because it's obviously, if it's going to take 103 days, which
You
is
could
the
be
average,
dead.
you could be dead.
Yeah.
And that is the issue,
Yeah.
but we've got to operate within the current legal framework. So any changes to that, then obviously, yes, we can change at that point, but the current legal framework it's not an easy process.
Yeah, and I think the public should understand that actually you have to go through a whole case. So it's exactly the same as though you're going to go to the Crown Prosecution Service with a fully completed case file, which can take months and months, and in some cases years, to complete. And so it is ridiculous that lives could be lost in that process. That's not the fault of the police, that's the fault of the process. And obviously there are several things we can do, as you've just described, but we also need to talk to government.
What I've wanted to ensure is when we get to that court, that we actually are successful in the application, which is what we're seeing, hence why our number of stalking prevention orders have
because I think we're about 26 now. We were at 3.
Yeah, 31 was the latest figure.
31, excellent. Yeah. But when we spoke to Katie Bourne about this, I think she was at about 90, and she's a tiny force, so she's doing something really well in that force, and there might be some learning from Sussex that you could potentially
definitely
gain.
reach out.
And just as a reminder, the primary objective is the prosecution of court orders and sentencing and rehabilitation. It's only where that doesn't happen you look to a stalking and protection order. It's not an alternative. It's the primary is we should be putting these people through the criminal justice process, and there should be court orders immediately against them within a day. Whereas if you can't get a charge, that's why you have to go to this.
Exactly, and so it's that problem we've got again about the charge, which obviously we're doing a lot of work around. We need to do more.
But we work with you on alternatives. If you just draw a parity to child protection and child protection orders, a police inspector can give an order there and then. Actually, why wouldn't we have that for this, to say it's immediate public safety for the benefit of that person, and then let the criminal justice process catch up?
Yeah, it
so
feels perverse. Yeah. It feels perverse. Again, an opportunity for us to take that back to Ministry of Justice.
I think offer ourselves as a pilot for direct charging.
Yeah, absolutely. Again.
Leading
Absolutely.
the way again.
So West Yorkshire Police have recently produced a video on cuckooing, which I've seen, to help raise residents' awareness of this exploitation of vulnerable people in their own homes. Can you explain the extent of cuckooing in West Yorkshire and how West Yorkshire Police work with partners to address it?
Yeah, so we currently record the numbers, and that's either of addresses, victims, but also offenders flagged on records. And obviously across those three areas, that's been linked to cooing either by intelligence or crime records. So as of October this year, we've got 72 victims, 13 offenders and 46 addresses identified across West Yorkshire. So what we're doing with our partners is to build that response to the criminal exploitation of vulnerable people in their own home. and obviously we've called that Operation Cuckoo. So what it's designed to do is increase the knowledge of not only the police but our partners and public to recognise the indicators and the exploitation of this type, because there's different people who are going in and out of addresses. So it's not just the police, we want to widen that as far as possible so they're fully up to speed. Increase the intelligence and help address the identification as well with our partners. Identify vulnerable people that may either become victims or are victims, and those who may potentially become victims to be able to provide education around the issues, including the risk associated and also preventative measures that they can take. Safeguard those who are already victims, and again that's a partnership approach, that's not just a policing approach. But the important bit at the end of all of this, and what we're trying to do, is increase the number of offenders that are prosecuted, who are obviously preying and exploiting on the vulnerable for their own gain as well. So 4 parts to that process. There's the education and awareness, and as I say, that's across not just policing but our partners as well. Address and victim identification, so again being able to flag those and flag victims, so we've got those on our systems and being able to provide that intelligence with our partners as well. Safeguarding is part 3, and that comes into 2 different areas, the preemptive and then obviously the reactive. And again, that's partnership engagement, so we can widen that as well, because some of our partners have got specialist skills that they can help and support in relation to this. And then finally, number 4 is the enforcement. So that is the aim to take control away from the offenders and give it back to the victim as well. So there's those 4 key bits in relation to that. And to assist us and our partners, what we've basically been able to build is a toolkit, and that basically consists of 9 different things that can help us and also our partners to address the issue of cuckooing.
Thank you. And obviously I attended a recent conference where we were presenting on the issue, so I know there's a lot of work happening around this terrible scourge. My final formal question of the meeting is around the Specialist Sexual Violence Service pilot project, which is happening in Leeds Crown Court currently. I don't think many people know about it, so can you tell us about West Yorkshire Police's involvement in the project, what outcomes we're expecting, not just for us but also for victims of sexual assault?
Yeah, so this is actually a Ministry of Justice led pilot, and that's to enhance victim experience in RASO cases at court. So the reason Leeds was chosen along with Snarebrook and Newcastle Crown Courts was because they had the longest RASO backlogs of trials nationally. So the key characteristics of the pilot, there was 4 areas. First was the trauma-informed training for professionals who operate within the Crown Court setting. So that wasn't just for court staff, that was for legal professionals and ourselves as police, which was the key bit that we were involved with. Enhanced use of evidence provisions. Number 3 was a dedicated victim coordinator role within the courts, and the 4th was to offer victims of remote access to sentencing hearings. So as I say, the key point for us as policing was number 1, which was obviously that enhanced trauma training. So we put 32 officers and staff attended that training before the sessions concluded as part of the pilot. However, when we reached out to the company that was delivering the training, we actually realised that there was still some sessions that were available because of the money that they had available. So we've been able to secure 6 further half-day sessions for West Yorkshire Police. So by the time that they have all been delivered, we will have 80 officers and staff trained in total in relation to that. The key people that we've got attending there are basically within our safeguarding and governance units and adult, child and DAT officers and staff at districts as well. So the outcomes and what the pilot looks at is to basically, for that first part, which is the key bit that we're involved with, is to increase our trauma-informed approach to victims, survivors of RASO offences, helping safeguard, also enhancing our delivery of procedural justice, and that's obviously linked into pillar 3 of Opsiteria as well. And it will also have further benefits of familiarising officers with the court setting process as well, and especially considering the imperative frequency to which our officers are attending court because of the backlogs, and providing that support to CPS and counsel when that court case gets there, because what we want to do is secure that conviction against the offender, and that's where it will help. But obviously the other 3 parts of that pilot, policing not involved with it, it's purely courts.
Yeah, and obviously I get feedback from HMCTS on those elements. Thank you very much, and interested to learn more about that as that pilot works itself through. The next item is just the draft calendar of meetings, just to confirm that we're on the same page as per with regard to dates and the items that will be covered. I think we haven't got an exception theme agreed. The meeting today has really led me to think that if we could do a paper on, I don't know how possible it is or how useful it will be, but something around community cohesion. I think the feedback from especially the young people in Harehills on the importance of community cohesion and how much they appreciated and appreciate the work that you're currently doing now, I think speaks to the importance of that connection that policing has with the communities it serves. And so I don't know what that will look like, and hopefully we'll get something marvellous that actually helps the public to see all the fantastic things that you're doing and give us opportunities to expand on that and do even more. But we'll talk about the detail of it outside of the meeting and see if that's something that we're the time scale.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 11, future agenda items as per the calendar, we've done that. And then item 12, any other business?
No, thank you.
And no, none from us. So the date and time of next meeting is Tuesday the 28th of January, 2:30 to 4:30. Mary, is there anything you'd like to say?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for everybody that's been watching, and thank you so much for coming and presenting in such detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for stepping in, Alison.
You're very welcome, and thank you to the public who are watching today.
Yes, yeah.
We hope to see you in January.